Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. You can see here I have a guest. This is a really special video because we are going to dive into some hidden benefits within the VA home loan. And that's why I brought on David Piatek. So before I bounce over to you, David, to give your quick intro, I want to I want to front load this a little bit for the folks so they understand some of the dynamics that we're talking about here. And like with most of the videos that I do, there's going to be, we're going to probably travel down a couple little side shoots just because it makes sense. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is condos. And, for a long time, the VA home loan program had a very firm stance on condo approval. And there's so many different things within the world of condos that, your amount of owners versus non-owner units and that type of stuff, and the homeowners owner association aspects and all of that. And there is some I don't know if we want to call it changes, or new light that has been found or what have you. And that's why you're here to explain this, because it's important for folks to understand all of their options, not just one of their options. And I think that that's really the point. And I'm going to throw this out there, David. I am going to have you on more often because there is home loans by itself is its own nuanced animal. And so with that, I'm going to kick it to you, do your intro, and dive into a little bit about the topic of condos for us. And I'll be bouncing some questions off you on the way. Go ahead, Dave.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. So David Piatek with VA Housing Education. I do a lot of education around the VA home loan, how to leverage it and how to use it. And condos is probably one of the toughest challenges for veterans to be able to use just because of the amount of misinformation. And, normally the VA does its VA handbook and also its circulars where all the updates happen to the VA home loan. Well, this topic today is not in any of them. It's almost like a hidden kind of treasure that exists that, veterans trying to buy a condo. And it's not for everyone, right? Some people want that single family home, 20 acres of land. I'm with you. But there's also a lot of veterans that live in the city, no matter what their status is. And it is really an affordable housing option, especially if you're like in a high cost area, because, I'll give you like Arlington, Virginia as an example. Homes are million plus, but condos you can pick up between 300,000 and 600,000. So it makes it more affordable in that sense. Now, there's definitely a big difference between the two of looking at a single family home or a condo, because it's you're getting all the financials that come with the condominium, right? When you buy a home, you manage it yourself, but you also have to pay a lot of maintenance, right? I own a house. Jason, you own a house as well. And the amount of maintenance you put into a property is significant because you have to upkeep, change the roof, sometimes siding, air conditioning, whatever the issues that come up, that comes out of your pocket and you have to pay for it in some way. Versus, like, let's say a condo where you're paying HOA dues, where you're putting money in monthly. So then they're paying for all those things for you. That's in theory. Now, some places that don't keep their properties up, they end up being dilapidated, and then they require special assessments. So one thing that I'll tell for the veteran community is request all the condo docs if you're looking at condos, and request the last 12 meeting minutes, because it breaks down and they talk about, is there going to be a special assessment, right? You can actually identify that early on if they're getting bids for all of that. So there's a million things that go to it. And again, for some veterans, it is also much easier to live in them because they don't have to do maintenance, especially if you're like an older veteran as well, where you don't want to take care of, cutting the grass every day.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So, from my understanding, it's pretty much everything external is kind of taken care of through that HOA, outside the front door or what have you. As soon as you walk inside, that's now your responsibility. I have a question for you. From I'm really reaching back here to my days in mortgage, which were many years ago. If the homeowner association is in litigation, right? So sometimes it'll get sued, right?
Mhm.
Um, Typically, at least what I've seen, is that's kind of the deal breaker. You can't move forward until that's resolved. Is that the case here?
So litigation and lawsuits against association are actually somewhat common these days. So it depends on what it is. So let's say if a building let's say you're being foreclosed on a property, that's okay, right? That's just a association suing a unit owner. And sometimes you have the reverse. You have the unit owner suing the association based on something they did. That's fine as well. Really, the major issue you would have in any type of loan is if there's any structural issues with the property. Then pretty much nobody's going to lend in that building unless you're buying cash, which if there's some type of that kind of like lawsuit
Mhm.
or fines put on the property, you might not want to live in that property. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, and
That
then
that
what makes, yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was I was just going to double down on that. Yeah, if there's that type of issue, I mean,
yeah,
usually that's not something that you're going to want to get into unless you're some sort of a contractor that's getting in there to try to do something and try to flip it, which is a very, very small percentage.
yeah.
Was
Right.
there
That's a
another
very
thought
small.
you had?
Yeah, some people too will buy multifamilies, like a 4 unit, and convert them to condos, make extra money. That's
Mm,
another thing. But let's dive into what makes this such a complicated subject is the VA condo approval. Tons of stigma around it. I'll tell you that the VA home loan centers are probably one of the best government entities I've worked with personally. They pick up the phone, they actually answer questions. They have a whole condo and underwriting department. So if you ever feel that, oh, something's not being done right, you can actually call the VA and they'll walk you through it. But now with this
mhm,
condo piece, all condos require VA condo approval. VA doesn't do these for you. Normally, you wouldn't do them either. Typically, a lending company or someone that has access to the VA's portal through Weebly will be able to upload the documents for you. Now, the thing is there's no cost in doing an actual approval. But the thing, Jason, is veterans get charged $800 to $1,500 to do these approvals. And I think it's ridiculous because, like, for us, we do them for at no charge to the veteran. You have to still pay for condo documents, getting everything together, and submitting it. I think why there's so much negative connotation around it is that people think that it takes 60 plus days to close when the reality I mean, to get the condo approval, but the reality is it only, I mean, we see it sometimes in 24 hours, up to 2 weeks, really. That's the longest I've seen it lately, and we do a ton of these. But there's so many veterans that just go through that process. They watch the channel, they reach out, and they're like, hey, how can I
mhm,
even do this? Can you walk me through that? And there's no additional cost to the sellers outside of getting the regular condo docs, right? So like that's not too hard. And the VA only really looks at two main things for denials, which is the right of first refusal, meaning like, let's say, Jason, you're selling your place. I come in, make you an offer. I want to buy it. You turn around and go to your association to give them the right to purchase the property at the same terms. Now, I'm not an attorney. That's my disclaimer, but that's
uh-huh,
typically how that works. And the other part is leasing restrictions, right? So if the association is going to have you needs to review who you're leasing to, that's a restriction. If they have a cap on how many renters are in the building, like let's say 20%
mhm,
cap, that would also warrant a denial from the VA. But they do allow like no short-term rentals, which a lot of associations have gone to. And they also allow for minimum of a 12-month lease as a restriction. Now, why these exist is that every veteran situation is different, right? You have veterans that are completely out. You have active duty, National Guard, and Reserve members. So they don't want leasing restrictions because if you got a PCS somewhere or you got to deploy, what are you going to do with your property if you can't rent it? Right? It's just undue
mhm.
hardship for the veteran. So that's why they have that. Um, and then
Yeah,
they really don't even look at the budget or the how many the rentals are in the building. That's another thing that people always say, or like real estate agents be like, "Oh, there are too many rentals in the building." This will, VA doesn't care about it.
right. Yeah, that's good. One of the things that we talked about here at the beginning was the fact that the condo can be a more affordable option into basically home ownership, right? Which I'm a fan of. You got people on different sides of the fence, whatever. I believe that owning a piece of property is absolutely an asset. Over time, it's there. I mean, there's no guarantee that in 6 months it's going to go
Right.
up in value, right? But in 10 years, it's probably going to be worth more than you bought it today. The longer you hold on to it, the more that it's probably going to go up in value, is the idea. And that's why they call real estate an investment and an asset, right? So my question here is although it's more affordable than a standard single family home, or you really wouldn't want to live in the single family home that would cost the same, right? Maybe it's in a very bad area with bars on the windows, right? So you can get a condo in a nice area close to the Starbucks and the, whatever else, right? One of the things I think that I have my own version in my head, but I want to hear it from you. Um, when it comes to the cost for the HOA, how big can you see a spread from condo to condo, and what things are attributed to the higher cost of that? Because that becomes part of your payment. So I just want to hear a little bit from you on that people should be aware of.
Oh, Jason, that's a good question because it can range from $50 a quarter to I've seen them as high as 3,500 a month. Okay. The spread is wide, not only in HOA dues, but also in the taxes that you pay. Now, remember, we're going to do a separate video on VA disability and mortgages, just because that requires like an hour long conversation and in itself. But yeah, you got to see what amenities you have. That's one. Two, like in Florida, it is really expensive insurance. So you typically will see HOA dues much higher on the coast. And same thing in high-rise buildings, because the maintenance cost on a high-rise building is insane. A lot of times they have all glass windows. Just imagine if you have to replace that. That's just going to be a massive expense. So that's kind of what goes into it. So if you have a pool, you have somebody that's security, somebody that's doing parceling all the mail for you, that all costs money. So that normally is going to be put into your budget. So when you're looking at condo docs, because you have a right to look at all the condo association information, it's almost like their financial profile for you to be able to review. But a lot of people don't know how to review them, just because, they'll get special assessments. They don't really see that they're not putting money towards something. And that's another point, is that sometimes HOA do seem really low. That's not a good thing. Some people are like, I want the lowest HOA dues, but if they're not doing any work to the property, again, special assessments. But on the other hand, sometimes they'll actually have a lot of money in the reserve, so they don't have to be able to collect a lot for reserves. So you definitely want to be able to double check that.
Yeah, good point. Now, one more question that I have for you that I think that maybe a first-time home buyer might be thinking about is, are interest rates impacted differently on if you were to buy a single-family home versus a condo? So let's say the same amount of money down, maybe it's zero down, whatever it is, right? But that part's the same, just simply because it's a condo versus a single family. What impacts would there be on an interest rate?
That's another great question. So when it comes to the interest rates themselves, typically we see that the rates are higher on condos, but that's typically more on like conventional loans. On VA loans, typically we don't really see that much of a difference. And Jason, a lot of times condos are higher risk. And the reason why a condo is higher risk, because they can lose liquidity. So like, let's say, to our prior example, let's say I bought in a 20 unit condo, everything is great. All of a sudden we get fined by the city because we have a structural issue of the condo. Now that citation is there, now the ease of transfer becomes a lot more difficult, right? Because now I can't even sell it. Now my property is locked in. Same thing with the rental restrictions. Now millions of people buy condos because, again, it is definitely an affordable piece. You can't buy condo tells, by the way, and you can't do co-ops with VA loans. So just keep that in mind. That's where partial condo, it's partial hotel. You're not able to do it unless it's a separate association. And then the co-ops, it's a corporation that owns it. Very different structure on that. But the good news with the VA home loan, and why we did this video, is that you can get a condo waiver in any building as long as you agree to the restrictions in the building to the VA. We've talked to the VA about this as well. It's on all the VA denial letters that come from the VA. And those typically, again, turn around is a couple days, to the most we've seen is 2 weeks to turn a condo waiver around and get it submitted. Now, the one thing that you do have to know, it's depending on who you work with. One, at a loan level, like loan officer level, they should be doing the approvals because they could do it the fastest like we do, right? People are all, we have a deal submit on Friday, and already Friday, all the condo docs were submitted. So in a couple days, we're going to find out if we got a waiver or not, and then submit it. Because for a lot of veterans, time is of the essence. Like if you
Right.
don't have a place to live, you're living in a hotel, spending a ridiculous amount of money. There's no cost to do
Right.
the waiver. The VA doesn't ask for extra money. And also in the description, I'll link official link to the VA's website on where to search condominiums, and they search by condo name. So it is a big win for veterans to be able to do the condo waiver. I just wish the VA would actually put it into a circular so that
Right.
that way more people could actually do it. Because just because you can, another big thing, Jason, is that just because you can do a waiver doesn't mean a lender will accept it. That's another caveat to this whole piece. We do them all the time, and we love to hear from veterans. So if you guys are in that process, being told to switch to an FHA loan or conventional, stop, because it is crazy expensive to refinance out of a FHA loan or conventional loan into a VA loan. I just did a video about that. Average cost is $20,200, not including like additional costs. That's just in fees. So
Wow. Yeah, no, that's great information. One of the things that popped in my mind as you were talking, and I know this is specific to condos, right? We're talking condo. However, this is one of those little side shoots now. Explain to the average potentially first-time home buyer who's, never really thought about this, looking into it. How about townhome versus condo? What are the kind of the structures? What's the difference? What is this the same thing? Is it just another fancy name? Can you throw out some information for the folks?
actually, the townhouse part is a good one. So townhome is not a type of loan you can get. You don't get a loan on a townhome. Okay. A townhome is a type of construction. So either that townhome is considered a single family, a planned unit development, or a condo. It's one of the three. If it's a single family or a planned unit development, that counts as a single family home, right? Attached single family. And a condo would require a condo approval. So a lot of times people will look at a townhome and they'll be like, oh, it doesn't require VA approval. We're set and ready to go. And then halfway through the transaction, they find out that it does require approval. Then lenders typically at that point will be like, oh, we don't know how to do it. Let's flip you to a conventional loan. So it doesn't have to happen that way, folks. There's definitely a solution out there with that waiver. But that's a good question, because you can also have single family condos in a subdivision. They exist. We've done them before. Those do also require VA approval. But note that waiver works in all these cases. And if a condo is been denied in the last 2 years, it's even easier because you don't have to resubmit the documents. It might be 1 year. I just talked to the VA. I thought, we knew it was 1 year. I talked to them the other week and they were like, oh, up to 2 years. So just kind of that might vary as time goes on. But if it's already denied, it's even easier because you could just submit the waiver and get into that home even faster. So I say that from start to finish, you should be in your home within about a 30-day window if a condo's not VA approved.
Wow.
But the flip side, Jason, is if a condo's VA approved, it's VA approved for life. So the VA doesn't even look at any more financials or any changes, which again, people get steered into. Let's only look at condos that are VA approved, but then it's like you're not even reviewing the financial information, which can be a disaster. So you got to protect yourself.
Right. Yeah. That's another great point. Now, I'm going to say this real quick, and then I got another question. So, one, if you're anywhere in the mindset of purchasing anything, really, condo, a single family, it really doesn't matter. Check out David's information. Solid. He'll give you the straight up information, and information is power, right? You don't want to fly around blind. My question now is, great that we know this, right? Great that we know that there could be a condo waiver, but what about that realtor who's done 2 transactions in their entire life and have been told that VA loans are just not going to work? How do we
Yeah.
combat that? What would you say? What would be your suggestion to a buyer in that situation?
Yeah, we come across that a lot as well, right? Where veterans come and they'll say, "Hey, my agent doesn't know how to do this." We make offers, they all get denied. So I'll tell you that having the right team is probably the most important piece. And I'll give you an example of what I do when I talk to veterans, because this, again, Jason, is something that does come up all the time. So when someone's looking for a condo or just using their VA home loan, always, like from my end, reaching out to the realtor and walking them through that process. Hey, these are all the misconceptions. Yes, you can do escrow holdbacks if there's repair items. The appraisal's not as bad as you think, right? There's the condo waiver. This is the process. We're going to go through it. This is how the loan works. Then send them a pre-approval. And then when you make an offer on a property, agent should be CCing your loan officer. Loan officer should be reaching out to that agent at any time of the day, right? What I say is that 7 days a week is really important because you're not making offers during banking hours, right? You're doing it when you're off
Right.
of work on the weekend, so they can at
Hmm.
least reach out to them and walk them through that process of, hey, this is how we're going to do the condo waiver. This is my experience with the VA loan. This is how we're going to get everything done quickly, because there's just a bad taste in a lot of realtors' minds about VA loans, because a lot of veterans work with like big call centers. They can't communicate with anybody. They can't get anyone's cell phone. And just like, as you know, it's like sometimes dealing with like the VA for the VA compensation. They kind of like hold things secret. And you're like, please, you can see it. Just tell me what's going on. That's what you want on this side, right? You want someone to open that communication, walk you through that process, and then how things are going to be going moving forward in a transaction. I'd say that's the key, because you can read the VA handbook all you want. You can read all the circulars. That's knowledge, right? Experience is, how do you take all that information and translate it into a closing to get you from start to finish? So if you guys want, again, you guys could reach out. We'll at least talk and walk you through it, because a lot of people have reached out and they ended up still closing where they're at just because they were at the finish line and they needed some guidance to walk them through the problems that they ran into. So
Right. I think that knowing a few things, right? Getting pre-approved, right? Giving all your information to the lender, getting that approval letter, actually having the conversation about it, that I am going to, David, I'm looking for a condo. Most likely that's what I'm going to land in. Okay, having that open conversation, getting that approval letter, understanding that depending on which condo I find and identify, it's not just price that's going to qualify me. It's also that HOA. If it's got a high HOA, I'm going to have a lower purchase price ability versus a lower HOA, a higher purchase price ability. But again, like you said, just because it's low doesn't mean that it's better. You got to look into it and make sure that everything's sound, and it's amenities, right? It's, if you
right.
want the pool, the hot tub, the bocce ball courts, the everything else, it's going to be a higher premium, and it's got this nice lush garden around it. Or if you want something that's, low maintenance, nobody's taking care of anything because it's just a bunch of rock, and there's no pool, no bocce ball court, no tennis courts, none of that, it's going to be a lower fee. So you get what you pay for, but keep in mind that your lender doesn't know which one you're picking. So the HOA fee is going to be a huge determining factor, especially if you're trying to stretch that value. So communication is what I'm hearing, David, is the
Yeah.
key. You need to
Yeah.
communicate with the lender. The lender will communicate with the realtor and speak in that fancy real estate language to help your realtor understand how to get this stuff approved. What was there anything in there that you wanted to hammer home that I just kind of encapsulated?
Yes. You made a good point about the pre-approval, or what you're qualified up to, right? For like the max dollar amount. Just remember, you're never qualified for a purchase price. You're qualified for a max mortgage payment, to that sense, because taxes, HOA dues vary widely. Some areas, actually, Jason, you can find a single family home for the higher price, but the same payment as a condo because of how high the HOA do. So that's something you do have to
Mhm.
be mindful of, because we've had people come that said, "Hey, I want to buy a condo. I can't afford a single family." And then we're like, hey, this $700 equates to about $100,000 in purchasing power. So you can actually purchase what you're looking for. So those are things to keep in mind. But that's why, again, knowledge is knowing you can use the VA loan. Experience is how you can actually leverage it to build wealth and figure out what you want to do with it, because you can use it unlimited times. But we're going to do more videos about all that in the coming months.
Yeah, outstanding. Here's my last question for you before we wrap up. If somebody's they get into a condo, they're currently in a condo even, can they refinance the same that they would with being anywhere else, as far as the special refinance type of loans out there for VA members? If rates are starting to trend down,
Yep.
in other words, let me throw this out there. Veteran is on the fence about buying a condo because rates are moving. Should I wait until rates go down? Well, what if you can get into that condo today, and then if rates go down, what kind of options do you have to bring your rate down? So I hope that I don't know if that's really a question. I just want to hear you know where I'm going with this.
I know
I just want to hear. I know where you're going. I want to hear it from you, so I don't have to say it myself.
All right. So a couple of things with this. If you don't use a VA loan and you buy a condo, whatever, you buy a conventional minimum down payment, you have a higher rate, right? Private mortgage insurance, you can refinance into a VA loan, but there's a couple of things you have to know, right? One, it's considered a cash out refi. Two, if you don't have a 10% or higher disability rating, no matter how much equity you have to pay a 3.3% VA funding fee, which is unlike buying a property. That's why it's also important for you to actually file your disability. That's how I came across you, Jason. I was researching stuff, and I'm like, all right, these guys, they're legit. They know what's going on. So that's one part, right? The second part is if you're waiting for rates to drop, Jason, everybody says this around here. Everyone, I'm waiting for rates to drop. So when rates drop, everybody around you is going to get into home ownership. And guess what's going to happen to you? You ain't buying a house because the rates go down. And this is like clockwork, right? I'm not an economist, but I'm not, this isn't rocket science. If everyone's saying they're waiting and everybody gets in when rates drop, typically you're going to see competition driving prices up. And then what's going to happen, right? All that savings are negated versus if you buy a place when it's your time to buy, you're comfortable with the monthly payment. You know you can afford it, and then you could do an interest rate reduction refinance loan after you've made 6 mortgage payments and it's been 210 days, right? So there's some options around that. You just have to really understand, again, the dynamics of how that program works. But yeah, that's a good point. Like I tell people, don't wait. If it's time, if you can afford it, execute. Because again, housing provides stability. Yeah, I'm in this business, but it also doesn't make sense for everyone to buy a house either, right, Jason? It's sometimes you're going to be very, transitional because you're moving from place to place. Okay, well, it doesn't make sense to buy, right? So, but you have that amazing VA loan, and remember, there's no age restriction, Jason. I have people that are like, I'm 70, I can't, can only use the VA loan within a certain period of time of getting out. Like, no, it's a life benefit. You could use it at any time, and even surviving spouses. Like I had a meeting the other week with someone. She was a veteran. Husband passed away 10 years ago, but she didn't realize that she qualified to actually use his VA home loan and not even her own. And she hasn't been collecting benefits for 10 years. So it's like a lot of these things where you're just like, man, this is why we do what we do. Push education out so people know what they're doing.
That's absolutely true. You know what? It has been an absolute pleasure, David. We'll have you on again very soon. I'm going to think of some great questions and some great dialogue that we can have on this whole subject of VA home loans. So really appreciate it. If you're out there looking to refinance, purchase, just want to get your toes wet, have some conversations, see what you would even qualify for, highly suggest reaching out and having that conversation. Information's free, right? So with that, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.